Okay, so today we're going to talk about A/B testing, which is a part of digital marketing, but I don't like to call it A/B testing. A/B testing is like the tool. Like you can do multivariate testing and A/B testing and experience targeting. There's lots of tools that are kind of encompassed in this. I like to call it experience optimization. Really what we're doing is we're improving the visitor experience, whether it's a website or an app. We're really trying to make that better for the visitor. And so while it is A/B testing, and that's a very common way of people know it in the industry, we're really looking at the entire visitor experience and trying to improve that experience. So before, today we're going to talk about the details of what
Recording in progress.
Got it. Today we're going to talk about the details of what that looks like as a career, but also we're going to talk about the details of kind of what we do, how we do it, things like that. So to begin with, I want to take you back in time. So 2600 BC. And the reason I want to take you back this far is because this is the first recorded example of an A/B test. So in 2600 BC, there's a city that's under siege. Babylon is pretty much owning the world, and they conquer Jerusalem. And when they conquer Jerusalem, they take back a bunch of people to Babylon, and many of them are chosen to be the future wise men for the king, King Nebuchadnezzar, I can say it. And so these future wise men are told that they need to eat the king's meat and the king's wine. They're going to be basically trained up in the king's court to be like him. And there was a few in this group that didn't want to do that. They're like, wait, we don't want to eat the king's meat. No thanks, we'll pass. And so the guy in charge, his name was Melzar, he was like, hey, no, I don't want to get in trouble. You guys need to eat the king's meat, so I don't have any problems. And the guys were like, no, let's do an A/B test. And so they proposed an A/B test. And it was the first one documented, but the variable here in this case was the food. And this can give us a pattern for what good A/B testing looks like. The variable is the food. The goal that they said we were going to measure this by was our countenance. He said, hey, if we look better after 10 days, then we'll know that our food is better than the king's food. So that was the goal. You have to have a success measurement with every test you run. And then they also had a control. You don't want to change things throughout the test. You want to keep things constant. And so the control was the king's meat and wine, and you had a group of people eating that. And then the variation was what these guys ate, which was, the Bible calls it pulse and water. So that was the variation. And then they had a designated time period to run the test. So they gave it 10 days in this case. And at the end, they have a result. And in this case, there was a clear winner, and the guys that didn't eat the king's meat were fair and fat, is what it says. But the idea, this is an example of what a good A/B test looks like. And so fast forward to 2007, you're like, hey, why 2007? Well, in 2007, I was working at a company called Omniture, and there were big websites were just kind of starting to take off, right? The digital age had happened. We went from like the one-page websites to websites that actually matter, with Google owning search and Amazon being a marketplace where people could start to purchase. And these big online companies needed a way to measure and understand their visitor behavior. And so Omniture, where I was working, was a company who was doing that. They would track everything on the visitors on the websites for these big companies, and we would create dashboards and do analytics and measurements for them. And Omniture at the time had just purchased a company called Offermatica. I apologize for the blurriness of the images. I was just ripping stuff off the internet, so you can see that Offermatica is no longer in existence because they were acquired by Omniture. But Offermatica was a testing tool. They did multivariate testing, A/B testing, personalization, recommendations. And so Omniture put this into their toolbox, and I became one of the first consultants doing A/B testing and analytics at Adobe, or Omniture back in the day. And so A/B testing, what it allows us to do is we have a control and we have a variation, and the control stays constant, just like in the example with Daniel, but the variation, you now can measure the impact of that change with the visitor behavior. And so in this case, there's a 37% lift, and so you know that this variation is better than the other one. That's the essence of what A/B testing is measuring for improvements to see if something's better. But what it does for companies is gives them so much power, because they go from this guy on the left with, hey, I've got a hunch, to this lady on the right who says, I know what's going to make something better because we have data to prove it. And that's the essence of good A/B testing. It's using data to make data-driven decisions. So let me show you what an example in real life looks like. This is one of my clients that I worked with. The client is called Uniform Advantage. They're a large online scrub company. All they sell is scrubs. But they had a business question. Their question was, should we use models to do our images, or should we just have a kind of a laydown of the scrub? And in the test, they wanted to learn this because they knew that if they didn't have to pay for models, they could save a lot of money. So this was the first test, and before we go on, I want you guys to guess. Okay, Adam, you got the chat, if you think this one on the left is version A1, type in A into the chat. And if you think version B, the one on the right one, type in B in the chat. And when I say one, what we're looking at is revenue per visitor. Which of these product offerings got more people to purchase the scrub and made the company more money?
So far, yeah, it's unanimous for A so far.
A's across the board. You know, that's what we thought too. And it turns out we were wrong. The winner was B. And that kind of surprised us. Yeah, exactly. We're like, what? Just like you guys, we didn't think that would be the case. And so we're like, that doesn't make sense. There must be something wrong, or we must need to learn something else. And so we did a follow-up test. And we said, well, what if we take the one that won, the laydown image, so there's our new challenger, our contender, our new control. And the challenger, we would say, well, let's keep the laydown image, but what if we offer additional views? So we still have a model view, but they're really looking at the scrub. And you might hypothesize like, oh, it's so that people can envision themselves in the scrub, or who knows why, right? The logic behind this. But so this was the follow-up test. So now what I want you to do again is the same thing. Type in A if you think the winner of the one last time will win again, or B if you think this one with the additional views will win.
BBAABB. So
okay.
Now we got B's coming in.
Okay, a little more of a split, maybe more for B's. Well, it turns out we ran the test, and what we found was that indeed was the winner. And so this led us to have more questions, right? Okay, people like to see a model, but maybe not an additional view. And so we had another question to follow up, was like, well, if we could save some money by not having each scrub have a matching additional view, that would help the company out. And so we ran one more follow-up test where we had the winner from the last test, where we had the scrub with additional views. But this is kind of like a default view. Every scrub had the same blue color with a model. Whereas this one was custom photographed to match the model with the color of the scrub. So one more time, A or B? Okay, how we do?
All right, looks like it's 4-3, A to B.
Okay, so a little more A is what I'm hearing. Okay, nice. So that actually was the winner. And again, you might hypothesize, oh, it's because there's a contrast in color, or there's some other thing they can look at. Maybe it catches their eye more. Like, I don't know. But the data told us that was the clear winner. And when you add all this together, it's pretty impactful. For this company, these 3 tests alone were worth about $2.5 million. And that doesn't even include the money that they saved by not having to pay for models and photography with having the same model for every color. So this is one of the reasons why in the wild, in the real world, A/B testing is so valuable and so impactful. And that's what I'm gonna talk about now for a minute. Now you can have an idea of what it is and how we do it. There's a lot of reasons why businesses like A/B testing. And the first reason is just that it impacts their bottom line. They can make a lot of money. They can identify what's working, what isn't working. And when you have things that impact your bottom line, that changes everything. It's a tangible measurement that a business can lean on to know what's working, what isn't working, instead of just guessing. So that's the first reason why businesses like A/B testing. The next reason why is because it helps guide their investment decisions. And I'll give you an example to kind of explain what this sounds like, what this looks like. So Microsoft had their search engine Bing, and one of their questions was, how much effort should they put into optimizing the website so that it went faster and the results would load faster? And they decided they would use A/B testing to learn this. And so they created variations that artificially slow down the website, the search results. And what they did is they learned that by doing that in a variation that was controlled for, they could then measure the impact on success. And so what they found was that every 100 millisecond that they slowed the site down, they found that was worth about $3 billion. So there was a 0.6% increase, which isn't a ton, but $3 billion is a lot of money for a company making, it's a lot of money when you add it up. And so that helped them learn that they should invest more of their resources into speeding up the site, because each incremental improvement would be worth that $3 billion. So $18 million annual is pretty impactful. Okay, so that's the third reason why businesses like testing, is because they get to learn what works. Sometimes in businesses you fail and you succeed. But with testing, that's never really the case. If you're testing to learn, even if something doesn't make you more money, you learn what does work and what doesn't work. And that idea of learning makes it so that you kind of always succeed. It's like you never fail because you're always learning, which helps you succeed even more in the future. So that's the reason why businesses like it. Another reason why is because you get data-driven decisions. I don't know if you guys have you've been around a family member or even a class where there's an argument. And it's hard to get things done when people have different opinions and different ideas of doing things. And that happens all the time in the business world, where people want to do things, but they don't have consensus on how to do it. And so by testing, you get a data-driven way, and information that shows you how you should make the decision, which eliminates the arguing, the politicking, and some of the problems that we see in business. So that's pretty big. Another reason why it's valuable for businesses is, I kind of like to call it risk hedging. So imagine you're walking across a tightrope and there's no rope. Like you're high up, and there's no safety net. And if you fall, you're toast, right? But with A/B testing, that's not the case. A/B testing is like a great safety net, because if something isn't working, not only do you learn from it, but you just shut off the test. Like, okay, it ran for 2 weeks, we learned it didn't work, we turned it off. On the flip side, people that don't have that, what they do is they'll go through a large release, they'll put something out there, they'll spend months to years creating something, and it flops. And then they lost all this money. But with A/B testing, you're putting it out there for a few weeks, you learn if it works or not, and so you have the safety net of, if it fails, you actually don't fail that bad because you learn and because you just shut the test off. But on the flip side, you can go much faster because you now have assurances that what you're doing isn't going to hurt yourself in the long term. Also, along this lines, if you do find a winning experience, it's that, like, you turn off a losing test after 2 weeks, but the winning experience gives you value into the future forever, right? And so you not only reduce your risk of losing, but you maximize your risk of gaining wins in the future. So, and I kind of mentioned this, but speed, when you have that safety net, you can go much faster, you can iterate, you can learn, and you don't have to have the time debating and trying to figure things out. And so you can go faster and make decisions faster. So those are all the reasons why businesses might like, or why they do like A/B testing, the value it brings them. But I want to talk a little bit about why you guys might like A/B testing, or at least why I like it. I know we all like different things, so I'm going to talk more about why I like it in terms of a career and why it could be interesting to other people. And the first reason is kind of obvious to me. When you can directly tie success to the work you're doing, you look like the workhorse, the prize workhorse, right? Like, your compensation is more likely to be higher because you now have tangible results to say how you've influenced the company, how you've learned things and gained things and improved revenue for the business. And that's not a small thing. Like, most companies do like an annual review, and when you have to go before your manager at the end of the year and say, here's what I've done, a lot of people are trying to find ways they've made contribute to the company. But when you do testing, you can say, well, here's the test we ran, here's the revenue impact, here's what we learned, here's how it helped the company. It's so tangible that it's really easy to show that you are valuable to the company as well. So that's one clear benefit to an employer, or the benefits to the employer, but it's a benefit to the employee who's doing the testing because they get to show they're valuable. Another reason I like it is because it's very mentally challenging. So I love the strategies of testing. I love the ideation, when you get with a group and you're trying to figure out what to test, you're brainstorming and ideating. I love that we're always learning and trying to discover what works. And that learning and discovery it's mentally stimulating. I also love that we get to overcome our cognitive biases. I don't know if you guys learn about that, but we all have ways of thinking that we kind of default to, and many of them are incorrect. And when you're testing it, you're kind of forcing yourself to get out of yourself and your own brain and your own cognitive bias and figure out what works. And to do that, you have to challenge yourself mentally. And so for me, a career like this is very mentally challenging, mentally stimulating, and learning the strategies that go with it are things that I just love. I love about it. Another reason that I enjoy it is because we get to work with cross-functional teams. So sometimes in a job or a career, like, you do your thing and then you go home and you're done. But to do successful A/B testing and optimization, you have to work with a team of people. We work with designers and developers. We work with product managers who are making decisions about products. We work with marketers who are putting out ads and campaigns. We work with executives who have to make important decisions for the company. We work with researchers who are trying to understand their audience and the people who are using the site and the business. And so, when you work with a cross-functional team of a diverse team with perspectives and backgrounds and experiences, not only does it make it more interesting, but you get to learn about their expertise as well. And so I feel like I know so much more about design and development and management and research and leading because I do A/B testing, and I get the chance to work with these people and synthesize their ideas so that we come up with good ideas together. The next reason I like A/B testing as a career is, it's kind of like Star Trek. They're on this continuing mission and they're always going from planet to planet, and weird things happen and new things happen. And A/B testing is like that a lot. There's so much variety. It's very fast paced because we're trying to overcome challenges to learn what works and what doesn't work. And by doing that, we're constantly moving the needle of what success is, constantly trying to refine the site and constantly trying to change and come up with new ways of doing things. And so that fast paced variety and the challenges inherent in trying to make a lot of changes, they kind of get me excited. It creates a a little bit of uniqueness that makes the days a little bit easier for me. So I love that part of it. Another reason that people like A/B testing as a career is because you really get a chance to push on boundaries. When you have data to back a decision, you can take that to the executives or the people that are making decisions, and you basically get to push on existing norms and the status quo with the data that you have from testing. So sometimes the blocks fall after people realize they were incorrect and the boundaries get pushed, which is fun. I love it. I love challenging people's status quo and their own opinions and ideas. And it's fun because not only does it make everyone a little more humble, it makes the environment more open to new ideas and creativity. And then I think that's the last one. Finally, I love it because, sorry, my computer went slow for a second. Because it's widely applicable. Like we talked about the compensation and the money part, but really you can take these skills anywhere. I feel like I could leave my career, my position right now where I'm at, and I could go anywhere with any company and do the same thing and be successful and make a lot of money doing it. And so it's widely applicable. It's a skill that's more recognized as being needed. I would say that if you guys have heard of the maturity curve or the adoption curve, you've got the early majority or early minority, and then the early majority, and then the late majority, and then the late minority. I feel like testing is kind of at its peak right now. Not its peak, I don't think it will ever decline, but a few years ago, there weren't a lot of people that knew about A/B testing and the importance of optimization. And when 2007, when I started, it was very rare for most businesses to be doing optimization. Now it's just almost like analytics. Like everyone knows they need analytics, and most people know now that they need to do testing and optimization. And so it's kind of at that good point in its life cycle where there's a lot of jobs available, there's a lot of career opportunity, and most businesses are on board with doing it. So those are the reasons why I think I like it personally and why I think it makes a good career. So any questions on any of those? Any thoughts? If not, that's fine. I'll just keep throwing my slides out.
I have a question, Rhett. What's sort of an entry level, if I said, yeah, I like this, what kind of job would I look for right out of college? What would the title of the job post be?
Yeah, good question. So a lot of organizations have analytics paired with optimization testing. A lot of organizations have marketing paired with optimization testing. So we're going to talk about this in a second, but I think it really depends on the size of the company. So if it's a startup or if it's a smaller company, you might be in the marketing department doing testing along with all your other responsibilities, analytics and ads and campaigns. If it's a larger, more mature organization with a large team, then the keywords you're looking for are more like A/B testing or conversion rate optimization is what it's called often, or some people call it split testing. Some people call it just optimization in general. So there's lots of names for this. Some people call it growth hacking. Like there's lots of names for doing A/B testing, and that really depends on the nature of the organization. Like, is it a sales organization? Is it a lead gen organization? Or is it like a regular e-commerce company? But those are a few terms that you might look for. So I want to talk a little bit about a career in A/B testing. This was kind of a great lead in, Adam, to what that looks like. As I was thinking about, when I was in college and when I graduated, this wasn't a thing, right? And so there was never anyone's like, oh, here's what A/B testing is, and here's how you do it. And so as I thought about that, I kind of looked back on my how I came to be where I am at and a career. And I had this, maybe it's kind of dumb because it's so obvious, but it was an epiphany for me. Like, a career really is just your past experiences in the workplace, and potentially your future career is where you're headed in the workplace, what you're doing to provide for yourself and your family. And so the past that I now have, I'm going to walk through a little bit and show you how I got to where I'm at. But my past could potentially be one of your future. If you're like, hey, I want to do this and it's interesting. And I think the cool thing about a career for all of us is that the future is unknown and it's moldable and flexible. And so I want to show you kind of how I got started doing optimization, because I actually didn't start doing this initially. I was at a company called Property Solutions. They have since rebranded and are named Entrata. Pretty good startup here in Utah. At the time when I was working for them out of college, they were very small. There was like 4 or 5 employees, and I was the second salesperson for them. And I had done sales through college to put myself through school. I like sales. I was good at it. But after being at Entrata and doing it for a while, I realized for my career, I feel like I was going to get stuck in sales if I kept doing sales, because that was the expertise I was developing. And so I decided, you know what? I love sales and I'm good at it. I can make a lot of money doing it, but I don't want to do it anymore. And so I said, man, it's done. So I left sales, and I tried a management position at a landscape company in Salt Lake. Pretty large landscape company. They do a lot of work here in Utah, and I was leading the organization and the teams and kind of helping grow. And pretty quickly, it didn't take me long being there that I realized it was not technically challenging enough for me. Like, it was fun leading people. It was fun, being in charge of the marketing and the hiring and all that stuff, but it wasn't technical enough. And so I was like, no, I'm not gonna do that anymore. And so that kind of led me to this path where I found optimization. And really what it led me to is Omniture, which was acquired by Adobe. We'll talk about that in a minute too. But I found that I loved optimization. I loved the things we talked about. Like, it's technically challenging, it's mentally stimulating. I get to work with people. I get to make decisions based on data. There's just so much of it I fell in love with. And so, as you think about your own career path, I think my first advice for you would be like, hey, just be flexible. Like, you're never stuck in one thing. It doesn't matter what you go to school for, what your degree's in. Like, there's so many opportunities out there, and you just have to be willing to change what you're doing and move on. So that led me to Omniture and Adobe, where I was a consultant. And all the brands you're looking at on the screen here, these are all the brands that I consulted with and worked with while I was at Adobe. And the nice thing about being a consultant and this experience I had, not only did I get great exposure and I got to work with some amazing consultants and people at Adobe, but I got to work with so many different companies that I got to see the patterns for success. And what I mean by that is when you see lots of companies and how they're trying to solve their problems and how they're trying to make money, and you see it across different industries, you get to see patterns that work and patterns that don't. And for me, that was really valuable to learn the patterns of success for optimization and just for business in general. And so after seeing these patterns and learning with Adobe and some amazing consultants and people at Adobe, I decided that I wanted to leave Adobe and try something else. And so after Omniture and Adobe acquired Omniture, I decided to start my own agency and do some freelancing work. So I started testingtheory.com, and I started freelancing and just kind of doing my own thing. And there was other aspects of that, doing testing on your own, that I just loved as well. Like, I was working 20 hours a week and I was making enough money to provide for my family. And I was, getting clients. And so I was doing sales, and I was, I had to build my own website, and I had to do my own training videos, and I just kind of doing everything, wearing all the hats. And so that was fun in and of itself, but it was the same nature of the work that I was doing with Adobe, but just in a different space. And then after doing that for a while, I started an agency, and a buddy of mine started a company, and we kind of merged our businesses. And then there was a falling out. Like it took us on this whole different journey, because I was in this entrepreneurial world where with the ups and downs of starting a business. And then while I was doing that, a different company reached out to me, and it was the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And that's my church. And so I'm like, oh yeah, I go there and I like what they do. And they reached out to me, and I was like, no thanks, I'm good. I'm making a lot of money and I don't want to do that. And then while I said no to them, I had some other issues with my business partner, and we had this huge falling out. And unexpectedly, things just didn't go the way I planned. And so I was like, well, that's weird. And so I went back to this company, the church, who reached out to me. And they're like, yeah, we need someone to come to start an optimization program at the corporate offices in downtown Salt Lake, because they didn't have anyone. They weren't doing very well at it. They needed to do testing optimization, and so they need the expertise. And so I was like, okay, I'll do it. And so that's where I've been for the last 6 years, but in the corporate environment, it's very different. And so the takeaway and the purpose I show you this, the reason why I show you this is because a job in a career, even though you may be doing A/B testing, there's any number of flavors. It's like Baskin Robbins. Like, there's a ton of flavors, yeah, but there's a ton of ways of eating your ice cream and enjoying the ice cream that you love. And so for me, being a consultant at an agency is different than being at a startup or being in a corporate environment. And this is the other one, being in a startup versus being an established company, hugely different experience. Being self-employed versus having an employer, growing a team versus joining a team, wearing many hats versus just one hat and doing testing. We kind of talked about this, but all these different flavors of how you do a career, whether it's A/B testing or analytics or digital marketing or whatever you guys end up doing, it's so different. And so the journey of your career, at least from my experience, really is dependent on where you are. Being in a startup is very different than being in a corporate environment, and being in an agency is very different than being at a company where you're not consulting, you're just kind of doing the work for your company. And so I guess I throw that out there to challenge yourself. Like, you may find something you love. I love A/B testing and optimization, but where you do it matters as well, and that can change your career. And so I guess my final summary here is that your career is in your own hands. There's always better jobs out there, possibly, but you might do the same job in a different company, and it's so different because you're working with different people and different angles of like consulting or for the company you're doing it for. So anyway, that's that section on kind of career path. If any questions on that, I know it's kind of generic, more just my own personal thoughts with my own career. If not, that's fine. Okay, then let's keep going. This next session, I actually want to talk a little bit more about the specifics of A/B testing and what that process looks like. Because it's one thing to say, yep, we build tests and we help people make data-driven decisions. Another thing to know how to do that. And so I'm gonna give you a quick overview of what that process looks like. It's not gonna be super in-depth and it won't take a ton of time, but it'll at least give you a better idea of what that looks like. So if you've ever played Portal, you know that you need a portal gun to get to places. And I like to think of A/B testing kind of like a portal gun. What we're doing is we're injecting code onto a website, which is our own little portal into that website. And when I have my code on that website, I can get things onto that page that most developers can't because I now have my portal. And so that's the first step if you want to run A/B testing, you have to have code on the page that allows you to inject the portal on the page that allows you to inject the code so you can make the changes. And that's how we do it. And so if you go to any website today, most major company will have this code on there, and they're doing that because they want to modify the page on the fly to learn what works without their visitors even knowing about it. So think of it like a portal gun. So the process though is more like this. First we have to define the question, we have to define success, we have to then ideate to know what to test, we have to create it. Can you guys see that? Is this being blocked? No, okay, good.
We can see it.
Good, it's just Zoom. So basically this is the process. I want to walk through each one of these steps a little more in detail so you can learn how do we get to a good A/B test. And it all begins with defining the question. So the goal is you really have to figure out what you want to learn or what your business goals are. And there's a lot of ways to do that. Some people just get brainstorming sessions together and they just ideate. They put lots of sticky notes on the board. They come up with a bunch of ideas. Some people like to start with a clear hypothesis. And I want to talk about this for a second because I actually don't like a hypothesis. And I'll tell you why. Like a hypothesis is you're kind of making a statement like, if we change this color from orange to blue, then the blue button will get more people's attention and they'll make the purchase easier, or they'll make more purchases. And so a hypothesis is a very specific kind of if-then statement. And most companies and researchers use a hypothesis to define how they're testing. But from my experience, it's too limited. And the reason is you might say, okay, we're going to test the orange button instead of the blue button because our hypothesis thinks that's better. But the reality is, what if that's the wrong question? What if you're just off the mark? And so a better question might be, does the color of the button even matter? Rather than zooming in and going straight to orange, you might say, does the color matter? And to learn that, you might test orange versus blue versus pink versus yellow. If you find that people do care about the color of the button, then your follow-up question might be, what color is the best color? Whereas the hypothesis would be like, yay, we learned that orange is better, and it's kind of done. Like you might make another hypothesis and say, okay, now we think pink might be better. But it's so narrowly defined that you eliminate a lot of the options you should be trying. And so just in general, and maybe it's a good example for just making good decisions in general, don't narrow in too soon on a decision you want to make or something you want to try. The first thing you want to do is zoom out and kind of look at the higher level business questions. And once you have the higher level business questions, you're more likely to zoom in where it matters as opposed to just saying, hey, this works. Anyway, so that was kind of a tangent, but one of my pet peeves when I see the whole industry saying, you need a good hypothesis. And it's like, yes, but it's very hard to get a good hypothesis if you don't have a good business question. So other ways people could define good questions or needs is they look at current problems. Like you might look at your analytics and say, wow, people are dropping off here, or the data might show you that people are struggling. And so problem areas are a good way to know what to test. And then some people just have prior research. If you've done a focus group or a survey, or you see other people in the industry doing something else, then that could be something that you want to try as well. So that's how the first step, you define your question, your business needs, and what you're trying to learn and understand. And then from there, you can go to the next step, which is to define your primary metric and your success measure. The real value of doing online testing is you have a ton of data. And with most companies, like if you're a retail company, you're trying to sell products. And so your primary metric, if you're a retail company, is revenue per visitor. We want to make more money with every purchase that we do. If you're a lead generation company, like you might, some people, they make money by having people sign up on their website. And so your primary metric in that case would be more leads per visitor. So the second step of having a good test is really to define what you're trying to influence as a company, and that should revolve around what makes the company money. If you don't know what makes the company money, then you're in a bad spot anyway, and you shouldn't be testing yet. So you got to figure that part out first. And then there's other secondary successes. Like there's the cool thing about analytics is there's so much data we can look at. So you might look at the bounce rate, for example. Like, did people come to the homepage and then left without even doing anything? There's other metrics that you can look at that help you understand success. And so you have to be clear on what those are and define those ahead of time before you run the test. Okay, step 3 is ideation. So once you know your question you're trying to answer, once you know the success you're shooting towards, then you need to ideate and you need to define 2 things. First is the variables, and second is the variations. So what I mean when I say identify the variables. So everyone look at this homepage. It's very simple, which is why I chose it. And we're going to talk about variables. A variable is an element that could be changed. And so look at that, and I want you to, Adam, maybe you can help me out here in the chat. I want you to type in the variables of this page, all the things that could be changed. I'm not talking about the specifics yet, but just the things like the top navigation, for example. That's a variable. Like everything in the top nav could be changed. So what are the variables on this one screen we're looking at? Maybe Adam, you can call them out as they type. Because if they're not typing anything, then I need to help them understand what it is more.
Yeah, Haley says font style.
Good.
And Alona says the color scheme.
Okay, great.
Image text, icon size, icons.
Good. Anything else?
Size.
Okay. Perfect.
Suction says layout.
Yeah, the layout. You got everything middle aligned. It could be left aligned or right aligned, or that could be changed. Good. Great. Good. So you're off to a start. So it's really easy to see the variables of the page. I wrote down a few. You guys got most of these: headlines, subtext, the background, images, social icons, etc. There's a lot of things on the page that are variables that can be changed. So the first thing is define all of them. And I'll give an example today. Like I had one client that was trying to run a test, and they're trying to test the top navigation, and they had defined a few of the variables, but they had missed a few of the other variables. So for example, they were trying to change the page, but it's like they had forgotten that we could test in the background image, like on this one. They'd forgotten that that was a variable, and because of that, they weren't controlling for some of those changes. So once you know what the variables are, then you want to control for changes by defining variations. And I just threw up a few examples, but you might have one version that the only thing that you're changing is the new background, the image. Like instead of this desert landscape, maybe you have a forest, right? And that could be one variation that's isolating one variable. Another version could be changing the headline. Someone mentioned style, like font size. You could change the text size. You could change the words you use. You could change I think someone, I don't know, just the fonts in general, right? You could have the social icons as a variable. You could hide them. Like maybe we don't even need social icons. Maybe they need to be bigger. Maybe they need to be just 3, the most important ones. And so you're looking at your variables and you're defining what am I going to test with this variable. And then once you define that, now you have your test, your variations. So the key here, where a lot of people make mistakes, is they don't identify all the variables and they don't define the variations in a way that controls for the variables. Okay, so that's step 3. Step 4 now is the creation. And if we were going to build a Lego castle as the test, this is what it would look like. You have your developer and your designer, they go in and they start building. They build the Lego castle that you're going to test. And you can see here that if this were a test, the variable that I'm controlling for is these are all castles and they're all gray. And the variable that I'm testing is maybe like the style or the size, right? There could be different things like these two are about the same size. Okay, that's kind of controlled for. If this one wins, then we start wondering, okay, is it because it's Rapunzel's castle or is it because it's the size? And then you do a follow-up test to isolate that next variable. Suppose this one wins. Well, it's the same size as variation 3, and so now we know that it's probably the style. And so you're starting to isolate variables to learn what works. And in step 4, you're creating them. So your designers, developers, your QA team, they're going in and they're making these things that you're going to test. So that's step 4, creation. Step 5 is launch the test. And this is may sound simple. Yep, you push play and you start the test, but there's kind of a lot that goes into this too. I mean, you're notifying stakeholders in the company. You're making sure that once the test is live, even though you've already done QA up to this point and checked everything, you're making sure that once it's in the live environment, the metrics are coming through, that the experience looks good on across the board in different devices. You're making sure your audience targeting works. Like when you run a test, you set up targeting. It's like you might say we want to target people who are in California, or people who are just female or male with children. because you want to show them a specific experience. And so the audience targeting is important to check after. And then you're checking other things like, what's our sample size requirements? How long do we run this test for? To give you a kind of a gauge of when you need to start turn off the test and look at the data. So launch the test. Step 6 is to monitor the test. And this is kind of basic too. Like you're basically just keeping an eye on it. So when your test is done, you may go in and look at the metrics and do like a preliminary analysis to measure success, to make sure you know when you should turn it off. And there's a lot more in these steps. This is just kind of a high level overview for you. But the 7th step is to analyze the test. And this is where a lot of the rubber meets the road with making sure you have a good test result, because you're going and you're diving deep into analytics. You're looking at heat maps. You're looking at recordings, like visitor recordings. You're looking at surveys that may have been answered during the test. You're looking at all kinds of data, and then you're calculating the lift on that. And when I say lift, what I mean is it's the percent improvement. So you're looking at one version and saying, how much better is this version than the control? And the lift will tell you it's 30% better or 20% better. And then once you know the lift, then you can understand the true business impact. And I have this graph on here. This is an actual test I ran years ago. But you can see that this blue version is clearly the winner. On the flip side, you see that the yellow and the red, they're kind of crossing, and then one's above, like, oh yeah, it's winning, but now it's not. And they kind of go back to, they kind of equalize, being about the same. And so good data analysis has to tease out all these variables. It's not enough just to say the blue won, because when you're testing learn, you want to know how much better is my Rapunzel castle than my Minecraft castle. And so you also need to tease out the variables of some that are similar. And the reason why we let this test run so long, normally we would have stopped it, but we saw this kind of behavior where the data points are crossing. They come close right here and then they cross again. And to us, those are indicators that this variation isn't having any impact on the visitor. And by letting it run longer, we teased that out. We saw, yeah, these are exactly the same. Whereas if you stop the test too soon, you might say, wow, blue is great and red is better than yellow, but this isn't a true picture. And so data analysis involves a lot of understanding of how data works and using all your different data tools to make good decisions with the data. And so it's a little more nuanced than just like, yeah, blue's the winner and these two didn't do as well, because you're trying to read the data at every point to know when you have a good decision, so you're not making a bad decision and choosing like a false positive or something like that. Okay, so that's step 7, you have to analyze the data. Step 8 is to document and evangelize the data. So at this point, you're putting together presentations with data, you're showing the presentations to stakeholders like executives, product managers, designers, developers, to make sure everyone knows what happened. And the key here is to really evangelize. You want everyone to know about the results. You want to share them widely with the company. We have a repository in the company that we use, where we put all test results there. And you can search it, you can filter it, you can find old test results to look for patterns. We've had people come up to us and say, hey, we want to test this. And we're like, hey, we tested that like 3 years ago. So just go back and look at these test results. And so documentation is so important, because if you run a test, then don't document it, those results are lost. And that's kind of like everything, just good practice in life. Like if you have a job at a company, document your successes, because when your annual review comes up and you have to show why you're awesome, you want to have that documented. It's just any success in life should be documented to share with others around you, not just for your personal gain, but because it's good to reflect on. So anyway, key for life, key for testing. And then the last step, which kind of isn't a step because it's a process, is just to repeat the process. So you're constantly evolving, you're constantly going through this process of refining. Oh, I did. Look at me, I was smart. I put the slide there. There it was. Okay, so I want to walk you through a couple case studies. I showed you some at the beginning with Uniform Advantage, where we learn about the models and the images with their products. I want to show you like 3 or 4 more from a few different industries and just a few different ways of looking at things, so you can see the breadth of what we can learn and also the impact they can have on businesses. So this first one, when I was consulting Under Armour, this is a long time ago, and you'll notice the site is very different today. But this was the control, and the variation we made is they had this question like, what if we put in product recommendations on the homepage? And the question was, because to make a product recommendation zone, that's a little more effort, it's a little more involved technically. You have to have an algorithm and you have to serve up the right products to the right people. Like I don't want to see a sports bra on mine if I'm shopping for a hoodie or shoes, and vice versa. They're the season. So like if it's cold gear, you don't want to show that in the summertime. And so there's complexity here. And so we decided to run the test to know if the effort to put in this recommendation zone was worth it. And so we did. So we ran the test. Okay, let's vote. How many here think the product recommendations was valuable for Under Armour? If you do, put a B in the chat. And if you think the control one, because it's more simplified, more streamlined, maybe clearer, then type an A in the chat.
All right, B's across the board.
B's across the board. You're all so smart. It's kind of an obvious one because you see this happening across most websites today. And there was a 14% lift in revenue per visitor, which is huge, right? Like if you can get 14% more revenue from one test, that's amazing. And if you go to their site today, at the time, this was worth about $3 million annualized per year. And so like this was like, I don't know, 10 years ago. And so if you imagine that one test, it was making them about $3 million a year, you see how easy it is to show the value of an A/B testing program in an optimization program. So I went to their site today because I was curious, and here it is. It's really long, but right up here at the top, you can see that they still have, even though it looks different, they have a recommendation zone on their site. So it's obviously still making them money. It's something that's been valuable for them. And I've noticed over the years it's kind of evolved with how they display it and where they display it, but it still has a pretty prominent position at the top of their page, and it's probably still making them a good chunk of money. So now that's one of my claims to fame. I was the one that ran that test with Under Armour, and it's still on their site. Not a big claim, but it's kind of fun. Okay, so let me show you another example. This is Norwegian Cruise Lines. And so it's a cruise site, right? And so if you're traveling, you're trying to get away. And almost every vacation site has this little vacation widget. And so their question was like, how can we optimize this widget? What should we do with it? And so we just tried a few different variations. The control had it kind of high up on the top of the page. We're like, well, what if we put it more towards the center of the page with more content? And then this variation, we're like, well, what if we put it on the left side? People read left to right. What if we give that more prominence by putting it on the left side rather than the right? And then finally, we're like, kind of to challenge our own bias and our own assumptions, what if we don't have it at all? What if we remove it? And will that impact sales in a positive way or negative way? So again, this last variation is key because the goal of testing is to challenge what you think works and what doesn't work. Because if you don't challenge yourself, then you're more likely to keep something that doesn't work. Okay, so these are the variations, same drill, but now it's A in the top, B on the top right, C in the bottom left, and then D in the bottom right. There's more options. Not as easy to guess on this one.
And you're wondering which one did the best in revenue? Is that the measure?
Yeah, so it was revenue per visitor. Harder when
we got B, B, C, B. Mitchell doesn't want to commit to either C or B. C. I'm gonna guess D just to throw out the wild card.
Oh yeah, look at him go.
And then Austin says B.
B. Okay, so lots of B.
So looks like most people are guessing B or C.
Yeah.
Nobody's guessing A or D.
Okay, and we might have reasons for that, right? Okay, this is like too far off the page. D is not there, and we think that this is an important element. So the nice thing about this kind of guessing too, I do this all the time with executives, because if you guess and you're wrong, you might initially think, oh shoot, I was wrong, I'm not very smart. That's not the case at all. We got to get past thinking we're wrong or right. We need to move towards what do we learn and what do we do next. And it's kind of the same thing with life. Like it's easy to shame yourself when you make a mistake. It's like mistakes are just ways you fast track your learning. And so that's what was here. Adam, you get the gold star. The best experience was D. And we were like, what? Because we know these widgets work and they work across the industry. So why was it better if we didn't even show on the page? And so this caused a lot of like soul searching inside the company, right? What's going on here? This one was good. Don't get me wrong. That was a good winner. Most of you got B and you were right. But this was even better. And so what that led us to is we said, well, what if we need to try something else? And so the hypothesis we had was that the reason it was better without the widget was because the widget itself wasn't very good. Like, look at it. There's a lot going on. It's kind of cluttered. There's a lot of drop downs. There's just a lot happening. And so we were like, well, what if we simplify the widget itself? Is that the reason why having it gone is better? And so we took B, which was kind of the runner-up from the last test, and we optimized it. We kind of made it simpler. We streamlined it so it was more visually accessible to people. And that was our new test. Okay, so now we have B optimized, and then this is A in this new test, and this is B. B is the winner from the last test, and this one was the runner-up from the last test, but just with a design change. It's so much easier when there's just two options.
We got B, we've got B, 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 B.
So
B's across the board.
No one thinks this one won. Okay. Well, this is why we test, because you're all wrong. Even when there's consensus, we can all be wrong, which is another beautiful thing. Like this actually ended up being way worse. Even though it won in the last test, this was so good because the location was good. We learned from the last test, but the design and the simplified version of it made it way better. And so one of the nice things about testing is not only do we get to learn what works, but it helps us kind of iterate into better options and better opportunities. And what I love about what just happened here is you were all wrong. And again, that's not a bad thing, but it shows that in business, so many times we fall into this trap of groupthink. We're like, oh yeah, we all know the right answer. And just because it's unanimous, we see companies all the time making a decision because they're unanimous and they all think it's the same thing, when in fact they're all wrong and they just don't know it because they didn't run a test. Okay, so that's another example. Before I show you the next example, I want to show you a little bit of strategy. This is one of the more advanced strategies we use when we do testing. So you've seen in a lot of the examples, we've employed what's called the iteration strategy, where you have a starting point and you learn something, and kind of like that cruise ship example we just went through, we learned something and we're like, what? Okay, let's iterate and make it better. And so this is the iteration strategy where you're incrementally improving and learning about the site. But another way to get even more value faster is what I like to call the baseline strategy. So the baseline strategy is you have the same starting point, but rather than just testing one thing and controlling for it, you make drastically big changes that are hugely different. And so what that does is if you win, you get a massive win because it's so different than control. The downside is you might lose and get a massive loss, but this is a way that you can like maximize your learnings and your gains faster. And so this next test that I want to show you is employing this baseline strategy so you can see what it looks like. So this was a client that I worked with called Cash One, and this was their landing page. This was the control. And of course, the goal of the website is to get more people into a loan, to get cash. It's like a payday loan type thing. And so this was the control, and we took the baseline strategy, and we're like, what if we just change a lot of stuff to see what works? And so you'll notice here that the heroes changed. This is totally different. There's a map. There's like a phone number thing happening down here. These three have the same widget going on. This one is much more of the baseline strategy where like we have the widget, but we changed the look, the feel, the location. We put it in the hero banner instead of kind of outside the hero banner. We have different models, different images. So this is the baseline strategy. Lots of different changes, and none of it is isolated and controlled for. But the goal is, if one of these wins or loses, we get this really, really big gain because of it. So one more time, A in the top left, B in the top right, C in the bottom left, and then D in the bottom right. And I know you guys are just guessing, so just throw out your guess. Oh, if you're wise, you'll guess well because I have the answer here. Everyone better guess C, otherwise you fail. Okay, there's the answer. It's C. So the cool thing about this is this baseline had a huge lift, 114% lift, which increasing by the conversion rate by 3% doesn't sound like a lot, but a 3% conversion increase is really hard to get in a company. So it was worth a ton of money. And so we decided to do the same thing. We did a follow-up test, and I'm not going to let you guess on this one because I did the same thing. I'm showing you the results right off the bat. But we had our winner from the last test. We had a new challenger, and then this one actually ended up doing the best, 129% lift. Similar concepts. We took the formatting and the style. We had different elements, and the baseline test did really well in helping us get a massive 3% conversion increase again. And so we did one more baseline test, and you see we're iterating, but we're using the baseline strategy to get bigger gains faster. So we took the new winning version and we put up a completely different one. And we said, well, let's just try it again. Let's make something completely different. And surprisingly, this one had, again, another 3% increase in conversion, which was 170% lift. So huge lift again, just by trying something drastically different. And so this strategy, well, I can't say I know what worked and why. All I know is it's making us more money, which at the end of the day is what matters most. And so the strategy you might take now is like, okay, this is the best one. Like maybe you run some more baseline tests, but you can't beat it. And so you say, okay, now we're going to iterate on this and we're going to really fine tune it. Is it the image that works? Is it the form that works? Is it this element or this element or this element? And so you can combine these strategies, but the baseline strategy is one great way to make a ton of money if you do it right. So they went from this to this to this to this, and none of them are very similar. I guess these two are a little similar. They didn't go too far out of the gate there. But a 9% increase in conversions is massive, especially for a company that's not super big. And so you can see that there's so much power in using data to make these decisions. Okay, one more example, and I want to show you this one's
I got to follow up on this,
yeah,
Brett.
please.
I just want to make sure I understand the difference between what you're describing. So initially you were describing, picking a single variable, making a variation of that variable, watching it, and now you're talking about, hey, let's just throw. It sounds like almost throwing spaghetti at the wall. Let's just try a completely different thing and see what happens. And I guess I'm wondering, what's the why not always do that? Why not always, throw out a big change instead of picking just a small incremental change?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I would say in most cases, you should do that as much as possible, but there's some definite drawbacks. So you're going to get to a point where if you keep challenging this with brand new designs, eventually you'll get to a point where you're not winning anymore. And so if you can't find something that really beats it in a big way, then you kind of stop and you just are left with your last winner. But the other drawback to that strategy is there may be some elements in here that are good and some elements that are bad. And you really don't know what's working and what isn't working. So your learning is decreased. And so suppose this is our best version because it had the highest impact. You don't really know what about it is good and what is bad. And you might have some good and some bad, which gives you maybe a net positive, but you might have a lot of bad in there. And so it's really trying to find the best balance of those two strategies. Throw the spaghetti at the wall as much as possible until you don't get any impact anymore. But then you kind of have to backtrack and say, this is the best, but were there other elements, like maybe this element's good, but we need to pair it with this element in this version. So you kind of have to backtrack and then repeat a lot of your work, which honestly is fine because now that you have a 9% conversion increase, like who cares? We're making a ton of money.
Right, you're starting from a different baseline.
Yes, yes. Which is back to this slide here. You're so far above where you would have been that it doesn't even matter. So now you're getting the iteration benefit as you increment from here instead of way down here. Anyway, that's why I love this. There's so many strategies you can employ to get good gains and to learn. And it really is kind of a science. There's an art to doing this, and it's not just like, I do testing. It's like, you have to know how to do it the right way to get the most gains possible. And if you don't know the strategies, then you end up just running tests and not making very much money. Okay, this one is from my current place of employment. It's a church, but at the same time, it's also a business. And it has a website. It's not a business, right? But it has a website. And so I want to show you this one because this is, we tested the top navigation, and almost every site has a top navigation. It's very applicable. They had this navigation for years and years and years. And finally we were like, well, what if we simplify it? What if we change it? And so, we had this metric we're looking at. We're looking at lots of different metrics because I want to show you a different view of how we do testing. Sometimes we don't always have a clear success, and so we're trying to triangulate what is success. So in this case, we had these 4 changes. The default, this simplified one, and you notice that there's lots of changes in here. Some of them are more subtle, like this has become better, this is get inspired. And then this one, the only change here is this says Gospel Library, and whereas this is Scriptures and Study. And so the metric we're looking at is page views. So I'm going to show you lots of metrics. And what you're seeing here is that if we isolate variables, this is exactly the same as this. And so we learned that Gospel Library is better than Scriptures and Study because this one has almost a 7% lift. Does that make sense? This variable is isolated in this one version, but in this version, we're not isolating variables. It's a baseline strategy. So you see that we've combined the 2 strategies. One we isolated, one's a baseline, and the baseline did in fact give us a much bigger lift. And so even though this gives us a better lift, we also learned by isolating that this word is better than this word. And so you can combine strategies to still learn and still get the benefits of the baseline. So we increased page views. The other thing we did is, this is just a different metric. This is a search. So typically when you're on our website, you can go and you can use the navigation or you can search for something. What this shows us is that these 2 variations decrease search, which is a good thing. Because if they're not finding what they want in the navigation, they go to search to find what they want. And so because they didn't use search, that means they did find what they wanted in the navigation. You see the logic there. And so we're trying to structure these with metrics to teach us what is working, what isn't working. And so we learned that it increased page views, it decreased search, it also increased time. So more people spent more time on the website, like in some of these study areas, which is huge. That's one of the goals they wanted. And then we also learned, I kind of showed you this, but we isolate these variables. So this is a 46% lift over the control if you just look at that one variable, which is pretty big. And this is navigation use. So different metric. So this is saying how often do people click this versus click that. So that's we isolated that variable and learned about it. And then we did the same thing with this one. How often do people click this versus click this? And Get Inspired was clicked, that had an 86% lift. And so again, you're isolating, you're learning, you're growing. And I want to show you this example because it's applicable in so many ways. Like every site has navigation, and this site has had this ugly, huge navigation forever. And it was not working. Like the visitors didn't like it. It wasn't. And one test showed us that we could make this better and we can improve it. And if you go to the site today, they still have that. We did these tests like 3 or 4 years ago. That's probably like 2 years ago. And we're going to do some new follow-up testing on this. And the testing this time will be different. We're not testing the content as much, but we have questions like, should it be like a mega menu drop down, like a kind of like a hamburger menu, like on a mobile? Should the search be bigger? Should it be left aligned or right aligned? And so we're kind of revisiting this with some different variables, but it's just fun because there's so many variables to tackle, and you can keep learning about stuff. Okay, how much time do we have? 3 o'clock? So I've still got like, what, 20 minutes? Is that what it is, Adam?
Yep.
Okay, I've got 2 more sections. This one is very text heavy, and I apologize, it's not as fun, but I wanted to go through it because people may wonder, like, what does it take to get hired in this? And so I just want to show you the last job posting that I did when I hired for someone on my team. And so this was the purpose of the job. We need you to lead clients, making data-driven decisions. We need you to use optimization tools and methodologies. We need to learn what works for our visitors, and we need to test every digital change and challenge the status quo. And hopefully this looks familiar to you because this is what we've been talking about this whole time, where we're trying to push the boundaries and challenge things with good data. But I want to show you the responsibilities, because you might wonder, like, what's a day in the life like? What does it actually look like when we're running tests? And so this one here is the first responsibility. You have to work with product managers and designers to create strategic vision and direction and variations to be tested. So that was the first thing. The next thing is you have to manage a complex testing process. So, I showed you all the steps to doing a test, and there's like 8 steps. Now imagine you have 50 tests at any given point in time going through those 8 steps. You do the math, and you've got a lot of moving parts. And so you have to be really organized to do good testing, because you might be working with a designer on one test, and then working with a developer on the next test, then ideating and brainstorming on the next step with the product manager and the designer. You might be interpreting results on the next test. And so you've got this flow of tests, and they're flowing differently, and they're each at different phases. And so it's complex. It's a lot to sort through and keep track of. You almost have to be a good project manager mentally to do good testing, because you've got a lot to manage. The next thing that we have to do, responsibility to document. We talked about documentation and how important it is, but you'll be building presentations, you'll be building Excel files with data. You have to document your learnings and your data. The next thing is communication. I have not hired people because they can't communicate well. If you can't articulate the value of a test, the value of what you need to test, the variables, the variations, the results and the impact of a test, who cares, right? You have to be able to communicate clearly. And because you're talking to so many different levels of people, from executives to developers to designers to product managers, you have to be able to communicate at their level and in their world and the way they understand it. So it's important. Analyze and interpret results. A lot of the job is just looking at data. I personally love data. I didn't know that when I first got hired at Omniture back in the day, but I was an analytics consultant, and I just fell in love with data. I love the fact that we can use huge data sets to make decisions. And as I've learned more and evolved, I've integrated quantitative analytics data with qualitative surveys, with visual heat maps, with tree testing and card sorts. And there's so many different types of research methods you can do. And in fact, because of the nature of research, they just moved my team into the research department of the church, because they consider A/B testing research, even though it's very much digital marketing and analytics and all this other stuff as well. So now I'm officially a researcher, even though I'm doing the same thing I've done for the last decade. You have to build presentations and create documentation. We talked about that. Presenting is key. It's part of that communication thing. You have to present the value of what worked and what didn't work and do it clearly. You have to evangelize test results throughout the organization, which is a key responsibility. You have to project manage and timeline management. And we talked about this a little bit. Being detail-oriented is so important. And I would say maybe in most jobs, you have to keep track of your stuff. You have to do things the right way to get it done. And then you have to be proactive, being action-oriented and taking care of stuff. And I've seen a lot of people hired and fired and left across my career. And a lot of it comes down to these 2 things. You can't manage yourself and you can't be proactive, then you're probably not going to succeed. But if you can do these 2 things, then the majority of the job that you can do, no matter what the job is, you'll be successful. And responsible. That's like the beautiful triangle here of success. Like these are soft skills, and these are skills that I can't teach you. I mean, I can, not really, like someone has to be responsible. I can't teach you to be responsible. But if you can do these three things, then you will be successful with testing and with anything else. Innovative, that's good for testing because you have to come up with new ideas, but it's not as key as these other three. Okay, so skills and abilities, I just want to throw this on there. This was more of a senior position that I was hiring for my team. Digital testing strategies, you have to know how to test well. And we've talked about a couple testing strategies: isolation, the baseline testing strategy, coming up with the variables and variations. Those are all parts of many different strategies you can employ to do good testing. You have to know Adobe Target. I put this on there as a screener. The truth is, I don't care if someone knows how to use the tools that we use, because the tools, in my opinion, don't matter as much. What matters is your ability to think correctly, to learn well, and to, just know how to do things. Like, just using the tool matters very little to me, but it was more of a screener. So be aware of that. Like if you're interviewing for a job and they're like, hey, do you know this tool? The best line you can always say is, you know what, I've learned the tools don't matter because I can learn any tool. What matters is who I am and how I can learn. And so write that down. Put on your future resume and applications because the tools don't matter as much. Adobe Analytics, again, a screener, but I do want someone who's analytics oriented, someone who can think with data and numbers. And so even though I don't care if you know the tool, if you can't think analytically like we need, then that wouldn't be a good fit. Presenting in PowerPoint, we've talked about that. You have to be really good at it. UX and visual design. Again, you see here, this is basic proficiency. We're working with designers every day, and so we don't need to be designers, but we need to know how to work with designers and understand a few design concepts. Like when someone says something that's very specific to the design field, you need to know what they're talking about in general terms. Qualitative feedback tools, we do lots of surveys. Again, I told you I'm now in the research department, and there's even more qualitative feedback that I'm involved with. Some of it I don't like because I like the data, the quantitative data, but it is interesting to see the different aspects of quantitative and qualitative and pairing those two together. Oops. User behavior and heuristics. Basically, you need to know how to look at a site and evaluate what might be good and what might be bad, not because we want you to know, but because you have to use that for ideation. And then heat mapping solutions, again, just want to put up more of the tools we use because I want them to see there's a breadth to what we're doing and not just we're doing A/B testing. And then basic coding. We work with developers, and so you need to know, hey, is this metric firing properly? You have to have some basic communication that you can talk to someone. And I think if you're in like a business program, at least I had to when I did my undergrad, that we had to do like a basic website HTML class. So I thought that was fun. And I encourage you guys, if you haven't done that, take it, because not only is it fun to create something and see it appear on a page, but it gives you a foundation for communication, which you can then use when you work with anything in digital marketing. Okay, those are the skills and abilities, the responsibilities. We also, at least for my specific field, I don't need to know coding and development because I have other developers. I don't need to be a designer because I work with designers. And I don't need to know statistics. And if you look up A/B testing online or go on YouTube or somewhere else, there's a lot of people that think they have to know statistics. And in my opinion, if you are diving so deep into the statistics, you are missing out on the other strategic ways of answering if something is good or bad by using data. And so I don't want to minimize statistics, but I never liked statistics as much as these other fields. I've had to learn it as a necessity for what I do, but I still think it's not as important as a lot of people make it out to be. And maybe I should qualify that. Partly it's because we're no longer testing like a pharmaceutical industry. Like you had to know statistics to know if your sample was relevant enough so you didn't kill someone. Like if you're testing a new pill or a new drug. With online testing, it's not the same stakes. Like you're trying to test if an element is better or a page is better or a flow is better, but the stakes are so different that you can lean more towards like this is probably good based on the data and not have this crazy amount of statistical analysis to prove this without a shadow of a doubt better. So different stakes, different industry, different framework. Okay, any questions? Because this last section is very different, and then I'll turn some time over for general questions. Okay. Oh yeah.
Can you make an example for the A/B testing? How there can be many levels of details.
Uh-huh.
So you can make it just visuals without buttons clickable, And I can imagine there are so many ways, and there are some pros and cons for going either ways. And what do you think is the sweet spot? What do you think is the what level of detail would be best for A/B testing? We make examples, yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And kind of what you're talking to, it's called the bandit-based optimization theory. So let me give you an example of what the bandit-based theory is based on. So I don't know if you've ever been to a casino, you've seen the slot machines. The one-armed bandit is what it's called. You pull a slot machine and you have a chance of making money when you're pulling a slot machine. And so what you're asking is the same as this theory. The question is, if you find a slot machine that gives you a return, should you stay at that slot machine and keep putting all your money into that to get the best return possible? Or should you go explore other machines because those other machines might give you a return as well? And so the bandit-based optimization theory says that you need to have a balance of discovery and of exploitation. You want to exploit the things that are working well that you've learned based on your testing, but you want to discover other unknown opportunities that you haven't tapped into yet. And so your question is not easily answered because there is no answer. The answer is you have to exploit where you find value, and you have to continually explore even if you're finding value in something because you don't know what you don't know. So you're constantly trying to explore things on the site or page that you can optimize while trying to hone in on something that you know is working and kind of tap it for as much value as possible. So does that answer your question a little bit? I know it's not a clear answer, but it's kind of the theories and struggles we deal with when we're trying to know what should we optimize and where should we go.
Yeah, I think that's good.
Okay.
Thank you.
If you want to read up more bandit-based optimization theory, there's a lot of blogs on it. Not a lot. It's kind of a deep concept, but it's a topic you could study more if you wanted to.
Can you type the spelling of I can?
Yeah.
The first word.
Yeah, bandit. Like think like a robber. Like he's a bandit and he's coming to rob me.
A bandit. Okay.
Yeah. The slot machine sometimes called a one-armed bandit because it robs you. As you put more money in, you get robbed. So it's a lesson for life there too. Don't go gamble away your money. Just optimize on websites. Don't optimize gambling. Okay, any other questions before I finish off the last section? Okay, this one's a little more fluffy, so I apologize. But as I was thinking about a career, it made me think about. I thought about this a lot over my life cycle of optimizing sites and businesses. That there's such a thing as an optimized life. And so many of the principles that we deal with when we're optimizing websites and digital properties apply to ourselves. And so this is just one of them. Try big new things, like do a baseline strategy with your life. Like don't just iterate and incrementally improve yourself on small ways, but try something drastically different. Like, I'll give an example. I'm gonna go buy a mountain bike today, and I've never really done mountain biking, but I wanna try it, right? And so like, to me, that's a big new thing that I want to incorporate in my life. And I probably should have done it like 20 years ago, but I just didn't. And so sometimes you have to take the baseline strategy for your own life and say, how can I try something big, something new, something different to make my gains, my personal satisfaction in my life better than it has been? So these strategies definitely apply. That's the first one. The next one is your slope. So in life, it's so easy to be complacent with where we are. You know, we get this flat line, and you know, you've heard of the term of like the midlife crisis. You guys don't know, you're too young. But Adam and I, you know, start getting older and you've been doing the same thing for a while, and you're like, whoa, what am I doing with my life? Is this where I should be? And a lot of people flatline. When I was at Adobe, I was there for about 7 years, and I called it the golden handcuffs because I was paid so well. I loved the people I work with. My compensation was phenomenal, and they had other things that made it even better. Like they have a 401k matching, and it's based on the stock price. And I was just making money, and I was working with good people. But I realized that my own growth was like this. It was flatlined. I wasn't growing. I wasn't progressing. I was leading a team, but I wasn't learning anything new. And so I had to leave, and it was hard, and it kind of pushed me. But what it did is it took my slope from this to this. And of course, what you never want to be is you want to be this. Like, you know, don't fall into bad habits. Don't fall into, especially like working from home or studying from home. Like, don't be too lazy. Don't have bad habits that are going to take your slope down. And so keep improving. Make sure your slope is upward. Lessons for testing and for life. Keep iterating and improving. This other one is incremental improvements. And I put this graph in here because when we ran a test, like some of them I showed you, we had wins and we had losses. Some experiences were better and some experiences were worse. And in life, you're gonna get the same thing. You're gonna get experiences that are like, yeah, it was amazing and I feel better and I'm on the right track. And then you're gonna have something that sets you back. You're gonna have a pitfall. I kind of mentioned this in passing, but when I left Adobe, I started my own company, my own agency. And I was freelancing, and I had a buddy of mine who worked at Adobe with me, who was also a consultant at the time. He had left and he started a digital ad optimization company. Like he was running ads. It was pay-per-click ads. So he was doing pay-per-click ads and I was doing testing optimization. And those two things go so well together. And we were like, hey, let's get together and let's start a business together. And so he actually had the bigger business at the time with more employees. And so I was like, hey, let me bring my clients over to you. We'll combine businesses and we'll be business partners. And it was really good for a while, but then there were some serious red flags, and I saw that like we were not headed in the right direction. And so I brought this up with him as my business partner, and he was like, well, if you don't like it, you can just leave. And these, by the way, these are my clients and this is my business and you're fired. And I was like, what? You know, this shock of like, we were business partners and we were doing this together. And I basically took my entire income and put it inside his company because he had the bigger business, but there was a side of him I didn't know, right? And so that was definitely a downfall, right, for me in my life. I lost my business, I lost my clients, I lost my revenue, and in hindsight, I kind of mentioned this. Like the church had already reached out to me and said, "Hey, come build this for us. We need help." And I turned them down because like, no, I don't want to do that. I'm making good money. So after that happened, after I lost kind of my business that this person I trusted just lied about and kind of took from me. I went to where I'm at now, the church. And I never in a million years thought that I would want to work at a nonprofit optimizing a spiritual website. And to many of you, that may sound, I don't know, you're like if you're religious or what, it doesn't matter. It's a website, it's a job, but I never would have chosen that for my career path. I never would have, because I don't know, maybe I'm too ambitious. Like I want to make money. I want to change the world. I want to make a difference. And then all of a sudden here I was working at this nonprofit and I felt so good about it. I never would have chosen this for myself, but this low of losing my business, it really forced me to look and reevaluate my life. And it took me to this new high of where I'm at now. And I've been here 6 years and I love it. And it's been good, it's been challenging, and it's been a new kind of growth for me to be inside this corporation and to help people here. And so look at your lows of incremental improvement, expect the valleys because they're going to come, they will come in your life, whether it's physical or mental or family or relationships or with your work, and then just keep improving, keep incrementally improving, learn from the low, improve and move on. So that's a huge lesson for life. It's a very true testing principle. But the next thing is know your primary metrics. We talked about this. If you are a revenue driving company, you need to shoot all your tests towards revenue. If you're trying to get leads, you have to have leads as your primary metric. In life, there is a primary metric. And if you don't know what it is and what you're shooting for, you will miss out. So you kind of have to choose. Like all these things are important, right? There's so many things that are important in life, but if you don't know what you're targeting, what you're really focused on most, then you will prioritize experiences that will be to the detriment of your primary metric. So family, you've seen the health nuts, all they do is exercise and go to the gym. And I think health is important. I love being healthy. I want to be healthy, but to me, that's not as important as missing time with my family. Some people travel and they go everywhere and they have experiences and it's amazing. And I want more of that in my life, but I want that as a secondary metric. I want to have those secondary metrics. I want to have these good experiences. I want to have success in my career, in my life, in my business, and make a lot of money. But to me, that's still secondary to some of these other things. And so this is not my comprehensive list. I just jotted a few down to get you thinking. But decide what you want most in life and make sure that gets the primary time and attention. And then make sure you have really good, strong secondary metrics because your life will go wherever you take it. The next thing that is important in testing, we have to work with designers and developers and product managers and project managers and executives and ad people who run ads and campaigns and marketers. You need a good cross-functional team to be successful in testing, and you need that for life too. When I was first hired at Adobe, I was all in on analytics and I was loving it. And there was a guy there who was doing testing, and his name was Andrew Anderson, and he pushed me mentally. He was a mentor for me. He challenged my thinking, and he was that cross-functional team I needed to help me break out of where I was, to see something more and see the world differently. And so surround yourself with good people. Get a mentor. The people you hang out with, your friends, the people you date, your spouse. You can't choose your family all the time. I know you're stuck with your family, but make it the best. They are still your cross-functional team. And so your neighbors, your church community, your Like every person around you is part of your cross-functional team. And the more you can surround yourself with these experts, all-stars, the better your life will be and your testing as well. So that's another key to success. The other thing that we've learned with testing is, we have lots of test ideas and people are so opinionated. Don't let other people drive your opinions. I know we're out of time, so I'm going to go fast. Don't let people, don't listen to their opinions, guide your own life, cut your own cake with your own sword, steer your own ship. Don't let someone else do it for you. And then the grass may be green on the other side, but that doesn't mean it's better. So just be careful there too. Anyway, I think we're out of time. I don't know if there's time for questions. I don't know. You tell me if that was too much, but that's all I'm prepared.
That was absolutely fabulous. We are at time, so if you need to bounce, you're welcome to bounce. But if you want to stick around and ask Rhett any questions, you're welcome to do so. Rhett, thanks again. That was phenomenal. Really, really great. I really appreciate you sharing that with us.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for having me. It was fun to think through this as I put together, and I'm glad I could share with you today.
Yeah. All right. So yeah, like I said, if you want to stick around, feel free to punch in a question or just shout out. Rhett, while we're waiting, I just got to ask you, did you work with Jason Barron?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, he's at Adobe now, right?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
He and I did our MBA together.
Oh, cool.
Good buddy of mine. And when I saw you working on the navigation of just that top level nav, I was like, he had to have run in with Jason Barron.
Yeah, Jason's awesome. He's one of those all-stars that I met working in the church, and as an all-star now, he's at Adobe doing great things there. But so many good people will cross your life that you definitely want to surround yourself with good people.
Yeah, he's great. Well, thank you. That was super great, and we're getting a lot of thank yous in the chat as well. I appreciate you. That was very, very well prepared and very clear. You're a good teacher.
Oh, thanks.
You gotta consider teaching the digital marketing class.
I'll leave that to people as cool as you. Maybe someday. Someday I'll get there.
Very good. All right. Well, Mitchell, do you have anything you want to talk about, or are you just hanging out?
I just want to ask if you have like any book recommendations about A/B testing or something like that, or because I really like the topic. I never heard about it before, but I really like how you explain it and everything. I think it's really interesting.
I got a YouTube channel to refer you to.
Yeah, that's one place you could start. I do record videos.
Have you written a book, Rhett?
No, but I want to someday. I just haven't got there yet. I think it's on my roadmap. I want to take all these things and put it in a book. Even like stuff like the life lessons. Why not? So Michael, I do have a YouTube channel called Testing Theory, and a lot of I took off all the advanced strategies. I'm making a course to sell those on my website. But if you're interested, I'd love to provide those to you and check out YouTube. There are several books on the topic. Honestly, I haven't read them all, and there's a reason why. I partially don't like the way a lot of people do testing. It's very salesy. It's very, like I mentioned, like they get stuck on things that don't matter as much, like statistics. I probably need to go read all their books just to make sure I'm not being stupid. But I go to lots of conferences and I try to listen to all the experts to kind of challenge my own assumptions and biases. So I would say any books would be good, but there's also a lot of what I would term false doctrine in a lot of these books. Like they say things they think are important that aren't. You just have to be careful. But to get your feet wet and get started, yeah.
So you will recommend, instead of reading, you will recommend learn from the experience of others, right? On YouTube or
I mean, if you're interested, you should definitely read everything you can about it. Read all the blogs, read all the books. See what you can find on YouTube. I have a YouTube channel you can watch. Don't get me wrong. You should definitely do that. But you have to get to a point where you can question what these people are saying, because a lot of them wrote a book to make money, as opposed to they've been doing this for years and they know exactly how to do it.
All right. Thanks.
Yeah.